Good afternoon, everyone. Everybody's quiet. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey. I guess it's the rain that everybody is kind of mellow and slow, but we start with our hearts full of joy with this message that we're giving continuation to the study of this amazing book on the way to a world of regeneration. We're doing it a little bit differently today due to the camera in the back and the system that we were using. So I'll be reading, doing the saying the prayer as well, and towards the end, obviously the final prayer, and finalizing through here, controlling everything through here, and our dear friend Daniel. Before we pray together, let us read a passage of the book Happy Life when Joanna D'Angelo comes and says, "Be wise, invest in your future. What is happening to you now is the result of a past that you can do nothing about. But what is to come depends on what you do starting today. While you reap the effects of the past actions, your present actions have future consequences. As you sow, so you shall reap. You are destined for goodness. How to get there is your choice through quick or delayed action and setbacks. Suffering is not inevitable, it is the result of a wrong choice. Invest in tomorrow, and you will be happy beginning today." I'll put this message aside here so that if we would like to revisit later on, we can do that as well. On this note, we invite everyone to pray together, connecting with our mentors, the mentors of the SSB, so that we are all blessed during this hour that we'll be spending here, hour and a half. Also connecting with our dear friends at home as they come with their questions, sharing also their feelings, their thoughts with us. And all of us together can embrace and create, enhance this amazing balsam of light so that we can help the regeneration of ourselves and the world. Dear Mother, Father God, guide us as we come together to learn from one another, to learn from the mentors, Manuel Philomeno de Miranda, and those with the work. Giving thanks also for Divaldo Franco for the work that came through his hands, through his diligent work as a medium. And we put ourselves as the vase of work that you have bestowed upon us to do and to share with one another. May your guidance be with us now and ever, and so be it. So, I have it here, Jeanette. Hopefully it will work from here. No, here, please turn it off. It stopped, okay. Thank you. So let me share what we will be working on today. For those of you who have been following the first 4 sessions, there's a lot that you will be connecting with. For those of you who have not watched the first 4 sessions, please go back and check it out. Really dive into it. But most importantly, what we'd like to do is to ask everyone, invite everyone. We can ask, invite, I think is better, to really read the book. Not only this book, I mean, you can read this book straight starting from this book, but there are, the 2 other books that we have been working on for the past few years, right? That is an amazing start of what happens in the physical realm as well as in the spiritual realm, and the connections that we have with the spiritual world. And we're going to see a little bit more of this today. So what have we covered thus far of this book? The introduction, chapters 1 through 8, and we can see that it's quite a bit of information just by the titles, right? Today we will be covering chapter 9 and chapter 10, complex activities in the great beyond. Love never stops. The the title of each of these chapter already gives the indication that they're again, I mean, amazing chapters. But every time we go into it, every time we share these chapters with one another, um, my wish is that we had unlimited amount of time so we can share every single thing that Manuel Philomeno de Miranda is bringing to us, as well as those who are helping also in the beyond, and everything that is being brought to our attention in this matter. I'm just going to flip back real quick here just to make sure that we're okay. And so the the idea really is that I would like to bring, and I'd like to, and I don't want to kind of like give it away of what's happening, but when we talk about complex activities in the great beyond, it is the connection that we have with the other side, the physical, where we are inserted right now in this physical body, with the spiritual realm, right? And what this has to do with our lives on a daily basis, right? In every action, every reaction of our lives, because sometimes we may think, okay, I'm not a medium, or perhaps for those who will be watching this in the future that who are not, let's say, fully spiritist, they sympathize with the idea, but they don't come to the Spiritist Center every single day, or they don't find themselves in this setting as we are. But I think it's important for us to make this correlation. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to apply what we're learning here today, because it may seem that the message is mainly for spiritists, or for, to be more exact, to a medium, right? But we'll try to make the correlation. And I ask you guys as well to ask yourself, as you're paying attention to the presentation, to the material that we will bring, on how this really touched your heart, and how this will enhance your life on a daily basis, and for those around you as well, because it's not only for us, but also for those individuals who are next to us. So, chapter 9. For those, again, as we mentioned, for those of you who have watched whoever watched the session 4, we finished chapter 10. Sorry, chapter 8, with an explanation of a nurse who was being um, who actually had lost her father and her brother, right? And she had suicidal thoughts, where she, as a nurse, she saw quite a bit. During the moment of the pandemic, as we like to remind everyone, the book is actually it depicts the situation of what was happening in the hospitals, in the physical hospital as well in the spiritual hospital during the pandemic. So it's pretty recent. What is happening? What Manuel Philomeno de Miranda, through the hands of Divaldo Franco, is bringing to us is extremely recent. Is yesterday, if we can say it that way, right? So she was being obsessed, right, because of her past, obviously, as well as the connection that she had with this obsessor, with the suicidal thoughts that she had. So what they start to bring here in chapter 9 is the rescue of her rescue, as well as the obsessor. And it's always something that we like to mention and talk about, as the Manuel Philomeno Miranda and other authors as well, in terms of treating, when they treat the term obsession or the idea of obsession, is that it's not just one person who's being rescued. If we don't rescue both sides, guess what? The obsession will continue, will never cease, right? And we have talked, with some of you during our study groups, during our Monday meetings and whatnot, that an obsession is a connection between two spirits, right? It's never just one person who's at fault. Somebody has to open, to engage, and the other spirit will also establish that what we call the dual contract, the bilateral contract. So it's never a unilateral contract, right? And I like to say contract because it's in the business world. For those of you who know me, it comes easier for me to explain those terms. But anyways, so as the tasks intensified, this is Manuel Philomeno de Miranda bringing to us. We had to go back to the same hospital to continue extending the emergency relief demanded by the circumstances. At our early departure, the venerable hospital director was not only thankful, but asked us to also include in it the spiritist obsession activities in order to benefit many of their hospitalized patients who unfortunately had established a connection with the evil forces of nature. We watched the coming and going of patients, relatives, and discarnate friends, noticing the pernicious interferences of idle spirits and other persecutors whose aspect, we must confess, was horrifying. And I'll read the whole this whole beginning here so we can make sense out of it. I already had the occasion to see these types of spirits in cemeteries where the deceased bodies arriving for burial were fought over, as happens in any place where individuals can be hired for any type of service, including the horrendous crime of murder. Here, folks, he's explaining what was happening in the hospital, and he's making this correlation with what is happening, what usually happens in cemeteries. The body comes to be buried, and there are spirits waiting to attack that body. Sometimes as we have learned as well in the literature through Kardec, that the discarnation process doesn't happen overnight, right? So there is a connection depending on how the spirit, materialistic spirit is or not, that they will still be connected with the physical body and they will suffer these attacks, right? And enhances again what we learned from question 459 from the Spirits book, when Kardec asked, do spirits have any influence on our thoughts and actions? Their influence upon you in this regard is greater than you suppose, for very frequent it is they who guide you. So, and please, we're not saying, and I don't think that Manuel Philomeno de Miranda, that everybody who was at the hospital, not only who were going through the difficulty of having a contract or war with COVID-19, that they were going through this, or their family members. But he's pointing out to us how our minds are working when we are in this position. Can we imagine what people were thinking about their relatives, friends who were trying to go to the hospital and see these individuals, desperate parents, right? Family members, all the things that they were thinking, right? So what does this tell us, right? Because we could be in this position. Any of us in the physical body could be in this position. I was just talking to Jeanette earlier today, and she was telling me that perhaps, right now, there are a lot of people contracting COVID, right? And other ailments as well, other situations. And what goes through our mind? And what are the things that are going through the relatives, the friends, right? So we really have to make sure that when we're facing these difficulties, that our minds, in the best way possible, we're not forcing anybody, but we're inviting everyone. Manuel Philomeno de Miranda is inviting everyone to think differently, think positively. And we have seen in previous sessions as well that perhaps if some of the individuals who had COVID and those connected as well were to think a little bit differently, they wouldn't be, they would be in a, let's say, more positive situation than they were, right? And perhaps even the discarnation, which ultimately we're going to go through it, would be something a little bit more, let's say, easier, right, to go through. But anyways, let's move on. As if waiting for cronies or victims, an expressive number of entities wander around with their terrifying features. So these are the spirits that they are connected with these minds. And it's not to terrify, even though it is a terrifying message, but it's to alert us because we are in control of this, right? As Joanna de Angelis says earlier, we're in control of our future. So what are we thinking? It starts now. It starts with these ideas. So one thing that also Manuel, let's say Mr. Miranda, says is that public meetings continue online as it happened here, right? In the Spirit Society of Baltimore, where messages of kindness were presented and shared, right? And this is something that also he mentioned that the studies, the presentation to bring comfort to other people happen online, right? And it's we know that that happened to work, right? But then he goes into the meeting. What meeting is this? Remember, this is through COVID. There were no physical meeting happening in the Spiritist Center in terms of the mediumistic meetings. It was actually happening, uh, not virtual, but we'll see. And this is something that always it's perhaps one of the highlights that we have brought already, but we'll present to you again. So we'll see how important our sleep is also to all of us. About 1 a.m., we headed to the music room prepared by our kind Marta, who welcomed the guests and led them to their seats. Our spiritual director, Antulio, the guest for our special relief program, was already there. Two discarnate assistants brought in asleep, the young nurse, who was now resting serenely. Also, there was her enemy, the spirit inducing her to commit suicide, and some other entities connected to other patients from the hospital. The meeting was led by Spinelli after his ardent prayer to the heavens, asking assistance for this fraternal endeavor. We perceive a soft light entering a dim-lit room. Seated around the table were, among others, Claudio, Gracinda, Amalia, and Malvina, the esteemed mediums slated for the mediumistic interaction. After opening the meeting, Malvina went into a trance, squirming nervously under the psychic induction of the persecutor of the young nurse. Mind you, again, folks, this is happening as Malvina, for example, and some of these incarnated spirits were sleeping. So think of this. Let's go to sleep, right? And we're all sleeping. And we come to the Spirit Center. Sometimes we have those dreams, right? Oh, I was at the Spirit Center. I was with this group of people. I was doing this. I was doing that. We're working. And Malvina here, and we're going to talk a lot about Malvina tonight, is a very dedicated spirit or spiritist as well, that she is always disconnecting at night to do this work. And it's interesting that they, in other literatures as well, we have seen that they work, they come to the Spirit Center, they do the work physically, right? The mediumistic meeting, but then when they go to sleep, they continue. Or they start different works, right? And sometimes we have dreams and we don't wake up in the morning. It's like, what is this? I dreamed with this person, I dreamed with that person, right? And sometimes we just gives no. And on the flip side of that, what are we doing before we go to sleep? What are we watching? What are we reading, right? What are we thinking about? And this is an eye opener for me too, because most of the time I go to bed, I have to tell myself, do this, do that, change your thought, right? We're thinking about the bills that we have to pay. We're thinking about the issues that we had throughout the day, and we don't disconnect. Our minds are like going crazy, especially when I'm in school. Oh gosh, forget it. I'm thinking about the next project, right? What do I have to do? And it happens naturally. This is not to beat us and say, oh my gosh, this is wrong. It happens naturally. So we have to take a step back and we have to rethink on how we're preparing ourselves to sleep. Are we mediums? We're all mediums. Are we engaged fully in the spiritist work to participate in music meeting? Not all of us. But that doesn't mean that we cannot go to the other side and do good work. That doesn't mean that we cannot ask to go to the other side and learn new things, right? With our mentors. Because the preparation for us to reincarnate has happened some time ago, and we're going to see a little bit more of that. And then the spirit comes. He bragged with a certain audacity, declaring that he was a stranger to the group except for the young woman who became scared at recognizing the communicating spirit. He realizing that he had been recognized, he raised the medium's clenched fist and, in his wrath, tried to strike the young woman, but was impeded by the blessed phenomenon of psychophony surprised to be speaking through the mouth of a medium and moving through her, and without understanding exactly and moving through, well, and without understanding, sorry about the typo, exactly what was going on, he continued with violent questions exploding in his mind. So the spirit himself, who is being rescued, because this is not the actual nurse who was being obsessed, this is actually the obsessor now that is being helped, right? He is completely lost. What's going on? He doesn't understand what's happening. That during that moment, he's brought to speak through a medium so that he receives an anemic shock. Obviously, Malvina, being a very good medium, she's sending good vibrations towards him, and the whole group as well is um, trying to help this spirit who has been lost for quite some time. On session 4, we will see that this was actually in the 18th century that they had the last encounter. And then he asks, "What sorcery is this? What's going on here with me? What a strange court of law is this?" And then Spinelli comes and says, "This is not a court. We are not using any sorcery. And what is happening here is easy to understand. You are aware, my dear friend, that you have already left your physical vessel behind and that you have been harassing this young woman, already suffering from the loss of her father and brother due to this cruel illness. What rights do you invoke to disturb someone who fulfills her duties and deeply loves her family? What powers do you claim to have over her and over all of us, since nothing can be done without the permission of the divine laws? Why do you plan to destroy her physical existence just because she refused your shameful advances? Yes, she is the victim of your assaults since the time she was a child, and you try to molest her often. She managed to escape your moral illness, but your image kept disturbing her unconscious, producing horrible nightmares. Fortunately, death took you, but unable to free yourself from a past of debauchery, you continue with your vile ways, finally re-encountering her. And obviously, the spirit didn't stop there, and it continued this conversation. And then Spinelli says, to finalize, "You are wrong, my dear. We also know about the morbid days lived out in the city of Nice, France, after the Revolution, in the glorious days of light and darkness. In an impartial analysis, you owe her so much more, having misled her and then thrown her into moral and physical abyss. The old Annette, my friend, today is in the hands of the Lord, to whom she gave herself since a very young age, during the period where you found her again. She reincarnated under the protection of Our Lady of Nazareth, who looks after her. We lament your plans, although endangered outside of the physical realm. You will never be able to drag her to the regions of darkness on French soil. And since then, stars have appeared in the heavens, brightening the infamous regions in which the moral sores emanate the purulent residues of moral pestilence. Now you're talking to us through a devoted medium that offers her energies to help you regain lucidity, the replenishment of healthy energies, and recovery of your spiritual organism. She is a wholesome medium, and you know the language commonese in those long past days. And now, dear friend, you will feel a torpor and a drowsiness that will lead you to rest in order to wake up in another condition." So you see, I read the whole thing so we can kind of give it a conclusion to this part. But the rescue is not only for the young lady who is being obsessed, but for the obsessor as well. We don't know, Mr. Miranda here does not go back to what she has done towards him. But be, just by knowing that they have this connection, right? That they're so entangled in this thing for quite a crazy number of years, right? We know that perhaps she's not a saint. She has changed. She's doing much better now because now she's able to even resist what's happening. She has made the choice to become a nurse. She's a nurse. She's helping other people. Yes, for a salary, but she has her work, right? She had a family. She loves her family, but she's been attacked since she was a young, well, a young incarnated spirit, and she resisted. So you see that wants to change, but not necessarily the other side wants to change. So let us put ourselves in this situation. Are we free from these attacks? Are we free from these conditions? Do we have these connections? Let's put it that way. Are we connected with other spirits this way? Quite frankly, we are, right? We can be. Let us think just about our wishes, our wants, how we behave towards ourselves first, and how we behave towards others. And we will know, we will receive the answers that perhaps we are connected with some of our brothers and sisters the same way, if not worse, right? Now, there's a lot happening, I think, that is positive, that we also have led a good life, so much so that we're here, right? That we are making now much better choices than we were doing, at least we hope, in the past. So that tells us that as this young nurse here is now making better choices, so are we. But the connections that we have established in the past, they're not going to cease overnight. It's going to take much more work, just she has done. But the mentors are there for us, right? Our mentors are guiding us, are also trying to guide as well the, let's say, our connections, our brothers and sisters from the past. So what happens? As just real quick, the spirit is actually giving the opportunity to sleep, to rest, right? So that connection is ceases, and sometimes the connection leads to other connections as well, right? One thing that I like to highlight as I was thinking about this is that perhaps it's never just one connection, because this spirit have quote unquote friends, and we also have friends, people who like us. So what happens? They don't only attack us, but they attack those who are, who are around us. They create turmoil around us. So usually when this happens, they not only the spirit, but also a group. This is not on the book, but also a group of spirit also gets to put to rest, to give some time for both sides to breathe, right? Especially in this case here, the young nurse, so that we sometimes wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, things are better now. It feels that something is different. Nothing changed, but something is different, right? And we feel that like that sometimes, and we don't know what it is, right? But it's important that once more, both sides are helped. So when we are praying, let us not only pray for ourselves. What do we say at the end of the Lord's Prayer? Forgive our sins as we forgive those who trespassed against us, right? So we ask for the other side because we're not perfect. So in order for us to receive, to be forgiven, we also have to forgive, right? It's not easy, but it's a work that we're being binded to. So the Spirit's help. Now we're going to try to move on, and we're going to move on into talking to about Malvina, who is this very selfless medium working at this Spiritist house. Again, the work that is being done overnight, right? She's not there physically, but she's brought to the Spiritist Center at night to start to attend to the rescue. Immediate after this spirit that we just talked about was rescued, Malvina started to move in the chair, visibly in a deep trance. Antulio approached the medium, while I noticed that communicating the spirit present a significant change in its spiritual form. The face was wolf-like, and although it maintained its human appearance, it was finding great difficulty in the process of mediumistic communication. I also noticed that simultaneously, several disturbed spirits were mentally controlled by this entity, which demonstrated in its deformed face the hatred and despair for feeling almost immobilized, unable to control its own mind, enveloped in its unusual dark spirit. That we can see the level of disturbance. And this is now, I'm going to give it away a little bit, towards Malvina. She is bringing her own persecutor as a medium. Can you imagine if you have the worst enemy ever, right? And you are being the voice of that spirit or of that person. Let's say if we have to go and talk to, our worst enemy, and we're voicing whatever his or he or she's voicing. It's exactly what's happening here, but in a mediumistic meeting. Malvina, kind and dedicated to the Spirit's principles, served the Spiritist cause with selflessness and total surrender. The insensitive individuals do not understand that any and all persecution against the workers of the gospel, under whatever denomination, results in disruption of the ideals that sustain lives. And unfortunately, that was exactly what these disturbing individuals who hated her were doing. More recently, less than 5 years ago, the siege became fierce. A war against Jesus, the peacemaker, the unloved love, was waged by the forces of darkness. In that sense, in some way, all those who sought to be faithful to him were being attacked mercilessly, with the purpose of implementing a materialistic philosophy. Struck by a tormenting physical illness, she suffered continuous pain, sometimes feeling quite vulnerable and lack of incentive. However, lovingly assisted by the spirit guides, she proceeded with lax knees, faithful to the intensive and blessed program. And we're going to see a little bit more in terms of what these spirits are doing towards us, towards society. Once more, what has happened is because of our past, and we're going to get into more details here. I'm just going to give a highlight. What has happened, or has been happening lately, is that everything that has to do with Jesus, everything that has to do with God, everything that has to do with spirituality, and I say again, God, Jesus, spirituality, different denominations, goodness, is being attacked. And the idea here is to implement this attractiveness, if for lack of better words, and we don't want to go into really difficult words here that will give us a different image in our minds here in our hearts, towards a materialistic life, that everything ceases with death, that what I need today, I need it today. I don't want to wait for tomorrow, right? That I am better than my neighbor, right? Or I am something else than my neighbor, or I should have more than my neighbor, right? All of these materialistic ideals are being reinforced so that the goodness inside of us is pushed aside. So if anything, if we find ourselves in this thought, in this destructive thought, let us regroup ourselves and bring ourselves back to sanity, because it's one of their ideals. So that's why sometimes we have spirits come to our mediumistic meeting saying, look, I discarnated because I was a glutton. I discarnated in a very deplorable way because I spent all my money, and I spent the money of family members. I betrayed my family members. Materialistic ideals. And they're suffering on the other side. And it's happening. We turn on the TV, what do we see? Especially with kids nowadays. I want. It's my way, right? Materialistic ideals. We don't think just the materialistic life of being something that I have to consume, the consumerism of life. No, it's not just that. Anything that goes against a spiritual life, a spiritualist life, that we continue. And this idea of continuation brings us what? Responsibility. Because if I believe that tomorrow I will be back here to reap what I sow, guess what? I'll think twice before I mess up, right? It's easy. It's 1 and 1, 2. It's an easy math. And this is what they're trying to create, turmoil in our lives. Now, let us dive into a little bit more on who is to blame. Not that we're trying to blame anyone, but who is responsible for this? Why are we in this math? Why are we in this turmoil right now? Because if we also acknowledge that there is a future, we also have to acknowledge that there was a past. And if we're connected this way as a group of people who are trying to become better individuals now with these minds, it's because we also have a bilateral contract with them. Continue on the selfless medium. Every medium faithful to Jesus experienced this narrow gate, which we call the Via Crucis, to turn into better spiritual instruments of ministry of love. And what was that our sister Malvina did best? She kept the joy of her life, which is a blessing, never giving shelter to monetary spiritual assaults, always knowing how to encourage others and inspire tenderness in large number of people who reciprocated, involving her in the gentle vibrations of prayers, of gratitude and affection. And he says, love itself in itself always produces tenderness and affection all around. And then it goes into this explanation that mediumism is a manifestation of love in action, especially when put at the service of the nameless needy, recalling Jesus' recommendations to not let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. So then it goes, after this explanation, what mediumship is, they start showing what the Spirit was about to say. And we're going to get into the Spirit right now. But I ask you now, as the same way as we asked earlier, what do we have to do with mediumship? Are we mediums? We're all mediums, as we study with Spiritism. Perhaps not to a degree that means, someone will come and bring a message, right? Psychophony or whatever that is, a written message or whatnot. But perhaps we're connecting with one another. We read at the beginning that we are influencing one another more than we imagine. And it happens the whole day. Sometimes we have that thought, why am I thinking about this? We don't know. Yeah, perhaps it's something that it comes with us. But what are also the afterthoughts? Is it good? Is it bad? Right? So we can actually look into the connections that we have throughout the day. Let us just pick a part of the day and you analyze, okay, from 12 to 1, what was I thinking? We don't do that often, right? I tend to think about that quite a bit. Like, why did that just cross my mind? Right? Or sometimes something crosses, your mind, and then you receive a phone call. Oh gosh, I was thinking about this person, right? And we don't know. But anyways, so let's go into now once more the obsessor. It was the visitor who, arrogant and cynical, started the dialogue. This is again the obsessor talking through the obsessed, who was the medium. I know what's happening because my position as a team leader, I was careful to choose my best companions for this bizarre presentation. It should therefore be well understood that I am here communicating with you by my own free will and the immense desire of clearly stating the length and power of our battles. So they were prepared for war. And I brought very little what Mr. Miranda actually brings to us, but they're prepared for war. They're prepared to come and establish a war. And if they could physically do it, they would do it. And it can happen, right? Because sometimes, we don't, through the explanations that we have, yeah, a lot can happen physically, the disturbances, but they used many of us to create a disturbance, right? But the good side also have plans, right? But he continues to say, to facilitate our dialogue, I declare that I am not a supporter of your outdated and criminal beliefs. I am a disciple of the unmade dynasty, responsible for the caliphate and those who would be sacrificed and discriminated against, but would nonetheless reach the most distant regions of the earth. Nonetheless, this is past history. Now we are united, Sunnis and Shiites, against the common enemy that is your prophet Jesus. In the beginning, we respected him as one of the prophets who came to prepare the period of deliverance around the middle of the 7th century. Say it again. This is something that has been happening since the 7th century. But soon after, during the sacred wars, Jews and Christians united against us, and since then, we have reigned in different areas. Since a little over a century ago, however, we have endeavored to extinguish these cursed infidels who disregarded the West and part of the East with false beliefs, idolatries, thefts, and crimes in the name of God, but of a God built by them. I'll read two more things here to clarify what they were talking about here. According to Yalman, 2001, four caliphs after the death of Muhammad carried out the Muslim faith. After the death of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which is actually, he was the cousin of Prophet Muhammad, the dynasty was headed by Muawiyah, I can't really pronounce this, the governor of Syria from 661 to 750, Common Era. And so we understand the Sunnis and Shiites as well. This would take a whole day in order for us to understand what this is. But the Sunnis and Shiites are two groups of Muslims with similarities and differences, and the two groups emerged over 1400 years ago, after the debate who should be the successor of Prophet Muhammad. This is Chuck 2016. So these are two groups of that, as you listen to CNN, as you listen to any newscast, they always fighting with one another. Who has power of the message of the Prophet Muhammad? And they fight with one another fiercely, right? And they're together to fight against Christians and Jews. But why? Why? What happened after 700, the 700s? What did we have? Anybody would take a guess? The Crusades. Who was behind the Crusades? We were, as he's saying here, false beliefs, idolatries, thefts, and crimes. These are the things that we were creating in the past. So no, this is the reason why they're coming after us now. Us spiritists, us who want to do something in the name of God, in the name of Christ, us who are connecting with the Christianity of the renowned Christianity of nowadays, guess what? They're coming after us. They're not coming after us for just because it's free, right? No, I mean, there is a reason. We have a connection with them. Again, folks, it's not for us to be afraid because God is for all of us. God created us equal, but there is a reason why. There is a reason why we're going through the craziness that we're going through right now. Not only, and this is putting the pandemic on the side, which I think it just made it worse, right? And we thought that we would, after the pandemic, everything would turn around. There would be good people. No, and I'm ashamed to say, that I thought things were going to get better, but in a way, it didn't. I'm quite sure that a lot of people, not only on this side, on the other side, they got the best out of it, and they learned their lessons, at least to wash their hands. But right, at least served for something. We hope. But quite frankly, many of us were still lost. In a way, again, I'm not criticizing, but just the fear behind of something else happening. This is the first time in my life that I was able to connect with people after the war, because we read history and we talk about those those who lived right after the war, the recession of the minds that created this country, or who built this country as well, in a way that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So a little can of tuna had to last for quite a bit, and it was distributed through the whole family. And I used to read these things, and it's like, and now we're living the same fear. What's going to happen next? Who's going to be the next, group of people who will create something crazy out there that, and now we have another war, right? Trying to, already in development, but these are just the things for us to think about. So this is the connection that we have. This is the reason why now we have this spirit going after, or this group of spirit going after this medium. Now let's try and understand a little bit why mediums. Why mediums? Until we beat unfortunate propagandists of illusion and crime, sin and error, we will fight for the regions we inhabit in the spirit world to finally encounter the paradise promised by the Quran. Our commitment is to destroy, look at their commitment, this society that supports itself over the false values of Christianity and Judaism, which soon will be expelled from terrestrial culture. Our purpose is to spread disbelief and consequently hatred among the people clinging to materialism and the illusion of a soul existence, exhausting themselves in extravagances and excesses. We can stop right here and go home and ponder about this. Because if we can fight this fight right over here, not to become materialistic, we win. But again, imagine, our persecutors, our obsessor, they have our picture that they took, you know, close to 1,000 years ago, and they're looking at us the same way. They don't see that Leo is now getting up in the morning and going to work, not killing anybody, or not, really mistreating anybody, slaving anybody, taking the property of others. And yet we still see these things happening on the world. So who are we to judge, right? But instead of really say a prayer and conduct our lives well, because those who are next to us will be able to perhaps, give some guidance through our good deeds, right? But not necessarily we won't be able to demand anything from anybody. So this is the purpose. This is the purpose. So the spirit then starts talking. Antulio actually starts talking to this spirit, and it says the physical and moral resistance of human beings are indeed very fragile. This is the state of our hearts right now. It's not the state of a unit, but the state of our hearts. When steered and awakened to deceptive sensations, they lose their mind and exchange everything for this strange thrill that consumes them quickly. At that moment, however, they turn back to the beneficial experiences of the service of love and become stronger, regaining their lost vigor. It has always been like that since the mythological period of thought. So we lose our faith, we lose our let's say our position in life, with ourselves and God, and then out of repentance, out of fear or perhaps pain, we go back and say, "Oh gosh, I messed up. I need to go back." So it's something that has been happening to us, right? Perhaps we're not following the same hole, but it can happen. What are you doing? What you are doing is of the unusual cowards. I speak of your continuous and relentless persecution of our sister Malvina, especially after this war was declared, before she suffered the attack of enemies of her crystalline mediumship, but now it turned into unrelenting combat to destabilize her resistance, to give up the commitment she made before her reincarnation. We see her crucified in pain and moreover experiencing the plight of preserved thoughts that torment and hid her feelings, threatening her in 1,000 possible ways to frighten her. She is unbeatable because she relies on prayer and charity work carried out with love. She's selfless and experiences the immense pleasure of serving in the name of Jesus, while you, along your cronies, flutter around her, giving her almost no respite for moments of peace and joy. And then, as Mr. Miranda actually says, it was kind of hard to explain what happened in the room, right? As all of these individuals who follow this main character came and start to aggressively trying to engage in a war, right? And this is happening in the spirit world, the spirit realm. And towards the end, the small drums fell silent that they started, and a gentle voice was heard coming from an intense point of light that floated in the room and slowly took the feminine form. And the form said, "I've been Jesus pities you and asks me to draw you to me, the heart of a longing mother. Do not blaspheme anymore and be docile to the voice of truth." Look, who is the spirit directing the message to. Do you guys remember who Iben was? Second paragraph. After the death of Ali ad-Din Abi Talib, 661, the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, he is now the one persecuting Malvina for the work that she's doing. It's like when I start reading about it, I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, is this? And I went back, I was like, yes, it's the same one. So this is someone who is the, let's say, the heirs of the Muslim faith, the Quran, right? Persecuting us. Because as he's persecuting Malvina, he's persecuting all of us. And we understand a little bit more. But look at the years. When he discarnated, could he have had received the opportunity to reincarnate again? I'm quite sure, right? But the battles were established. And they were established by us in the past. It's not by somebody else. They were established by us. So we move on to chapter 10, which is in a way a continuation of this. Now we're going to go into more what mediumship is, our relationship to it, right? Well, we have a relationship because we're in a spiritist center, and one of the pillars of a spiritist center is a mediumistic meeting. If we consider ourselves spirit, we also have to consider the pillars of spiritism, which is the communicability of the spirits. That we are also spirits before we enter the physical body, right? The next day after they finished this meeting, as Ibn was actually taken, also guided along with those who were following him, the gathering under a canopy of an old tree with its exuberant foliage in the morning's mild temperature, we followed the start of the daily routine of the Spiritist community. The activity throughout the night had been intense, extending assistance to spirits connected to the program of relief and enlightenment at the respectable institution. I was also a resting place for the groups of discarnated spiritual workers who operated in the city and found there the resources for recovery, with special equipment for the direct communication with organizations from the higher sphere. Starting at 8 in the morning, in the same space we had used a few hours ago, a good number of Spiritist workers was already at hand in the rooms designated for fraternal assistant passes, study groups, as well as spiritual support to the discarnate. But what about Malvina and the work? Because Mr. Miranda was actually thinking about it, and he actually received some clarifications. We put this beginning because, as we have mentioned before, Mr. Miranda always brings this very poetic way to bring the scenery at the beginning of each chapter. And I think, again, it reminds us to also pay attention to when we wake up in the morning, right? Look at outside. Listen to the birds singing. Pay attention to the rain. Pay attention to the sun. Look inside of our homes, right? Pay attention to the goodness that is around us. And I think that this is one of the messages that he tries to bring to us, much like other writers too, such as André Luiz and many others. But anyways, let's go back to Malvina in the work. Brother Gacino smiled generously as he was thinking and explained. This is a little bit long, but we will try to digest together. Our dear sister was prepared long before her incarnation for the mission she has been fulfilling with all possible fidelity. When the project was devised around 1830, in our spiritual community, she was chosen to become the medium responsible for its planning and long-term structuring on the material plane. It is not the first time she has practiced mediumship. However, this time it would be deeply linked to the gospel of Jesus Christ, to the service of charity, and the building of the kingdom of God in all our hearts. Her previous experience in mediumship had been sort of a training to experience the two planes of life, naturally acquiring strength and resistance for her future edifying struggles. Reading this, it's like, wait a minute. So this whole work was started, or it started to being prepared back in 1830. And I was like, wow, maybe I was being prepared as well to do some of the things, and I haven't started yet, right? And I started thinking about our connections, right? On how, because if Malvina was prepared, so were the other spiritist workers, not only in the spirit realm but also in the physical realm. And there we see our connections. 1830, and this is to, let's say, for the spiritist work. But what about our connection, our family members, friends, co-workers that sometimes we connect and we're like, maybe it seems like I know this person, it feels like I know this person, right? Or why do I draw towards this person? Or why do I this person draws towards me? Please go away, right? I'm just joking, but we feel that way sometimes, and we don't know. But the preparation probably have started a long, long time ago, and we don't know where it comes from. All that we can grasp is the severity of that connection. Or perhaps, as much as we try to go someplace else, you're like, you know what, but I'm going to stay here, right? Oh, I want to go and travel to and go live in this place. Everything happens that you just stay in that place. You do your little, that we seem very little, right? It seems very little to us, but that's what we need to do. Interesting enough, Aloysius sent me a video of this gentleman who lives in Hawaii, and lives a very interesting life in the middle of nowhere in Hawaii, with the elements. I mean, he built his own house, and it's a beautiful video. It's really amazing. And he asked me, would you be able to do the same thing? Because he knows that I like the beach. I like Hawaii. I've never been there, but I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm that strong. I don't think I have the preparation to live that way. Even though I love the beach, I love to, uh, um, let's say, engage on the things that this gentleman does, and I'll live it in Hawaii. But I'm not that strong. This man, quite frankly, I think that he was prepared to live that kind of life, to lead that kind of life, right? And how he tells, the audience, how he connects with even the dolphins, swimming with the dolphins. It's just amazing. It's really amazing. And in thinking about it as we read this as well, it's like perhaps we weren't prepared to live the lives that sometimes are being shown to us that we think is super cool. And we also remind ourselves that God never gives us what our shoulders cannot bear, right? And it's always one of those things that, we think that the other side is always green, but others are thinking the same thing about us. And we know what we're bearing, the difficulties that we're seeing. So he continues to say, Gracindo, educated by spiritual mentors, the course of her life has been well defined for the execution of the higher programs ahead. She herself had chosen to be a female, as she considered mediumship a delicate expression of temporary and brief motherhood occurring during the phenomena of psychophony and psychography, where she received outsiders with tenderness and high sensitivity to hormones typical of the somatic organism of women. So she chose to reincarnate as a woman because she thought that would be the best way to present herself, to show herself in that motherly um, figure, right? And do the work. From an early age, she began to see and hear spirits, as well as become an instrument for their communication, especially the scornful, despite the protection of her mentors. Divine mercy has always protected her from evil, providing her with a very strong Catholic childhood, training her mind and in heart in the sweet message of Jesus and some saints who fascinated her. After many incidents, including a close instance of spirit obsession, she learned to dedicate herself to mediumship, docile to the guidance of high order spirits. This allowed her to get acquainted with other mediums, acquiring experiences, understanding the pitfalls and challenges posed by enemies from the past and adversaries of the good, who took pleasure in making her suffer, aiming at disturbing aiming and disturbing her work and preventing the purpose for which she was reborn. We see here that perhaps even though she was prepared and she had a great um, connection with the deciding on how she was going to reincarnate, that doesn't mean that the connections of the past were stopped. It's the opposite. They came. There, um, she was given the opportunity to connect with these minds, so she can prove herself, and she also can help others from the past to disconnect from her. Mediumship is a treasure that spiritual thieves wish to get their hands on, so that adrift it becomes an instrument of human and social imbalance. On the other hand, she never lacked friends from both dimensions of life, helping her to protect herself and persevere with courage and the joy of serving. When sincere mediums understand the meaning of mediumship as a bridge between two planes of existence, the interaction will become much easier for them. Its practice always safeguarded by the values of their moral life and their examples of abnegation and charity. I'll stop right over here because we can kind of make some sense to what they're trying to bring to us. And I like this. It's not new to us because Divaldo Franco already mentions this. Gives this analogy of mediumship being this bridge, right? If we're crossing a bridge and we stop in the middle of it, what happens? Because usually most bridges, they do not have a stoplight. It's an ongoing flow all the time. Think about it. Let's picture a bridge. If when you go through Bay Bridge, for example, for those who are kind of following us online, is the bridge that connects Annapolis and help me here. Annapolis and what? Um, the Eastern Shore in Maryland, by the way. But I'm pretty sure wherever you are, you'll be able to connect. But it's an ongoing traffic. Sometimes we have what? A two-way traffic, right? That they have dividers and whatnot. Sometimes it's a small bridge or a bigger bridge or whatever. But most of the time, 90% of the time, it will be an ongoing traffic. It won't stop. Unless if the bridge opens, one of those bridges that, that allows, boats to go pass by underneath. Why we're saying this? How are we connected with this? Because if we're the individual, perhaps, that is stopped in the middle of the bridge, we're stopping the flow of goodness. That's the only sense that I can make out of this, and hopefully this can help you as well, right? And sometimes we may not be as sensitive as our partner, our friend, or someone else, right? And we tend to create turmoil in other people's life, or sometimes in our lives, who are also mediums, and we stop this flow. We choose negative things, and we stop this flow. We choose a materialistic life, and we stop the flow. This is how we're going to get connected. If we think that the planet Earth has a third of the total population that involves us, and this is by Emmanuel, incarnated, and the other two-thirds are still waiting or connected with us in the psychosphere, guess what? It's the only way we will grow, that we will advance. It's through the work of mediumship, our connection with the beyond, that we'll be able to connect and say, let's change. So when we choose the good things for our life, and we're mediums, we're always connected, guess what? Others will also say, you know what? Leo's changing. I'm going to do the same thing. Jeanette made a good decision today. That was appealing, right? So the spirits will also think and change. It doesn't have to be in a mediumistic meeting, but because of our connection with the beyond, they will also change. And then things will start changing. And then the psychosphere, as we like to say, will also start changing as well. I hope it makes sense to you, because this is truly eye-opener to all of us, at least I think. We can confirm that her spirit guides invested 120 years in this undertaking to be at her side until the completion of her task. Many in the Spiritist movement still do not understand the role of mediumship and the sacrifice reserved for mediums, taking into consideration their moral past in addition to the higher purpose of serving as bridges for humanity's benefactors in their work of love and peace among human beings. At the beginning of the widespread psychic phenomena, mediums were accused of being mentally ill, charlatans, and narcissists, and rightfully so in certain instances, among them the lack of knowledge of the Spiritist teachings, which contain the sound recommendations for the correct exercise of mediumship. Later, many respectful mediums devoted to Jesus were and continue to be attached by others inspired by the enemies of the Lord's cause and other inferior sentiments common to all of us. But whoever endures to the end, as taught by the Master, will succeed. These days, the need to exercise mediumship under the sublime light of Spiritism is urgent, but unfortunately, the distractions and the moral license have been open doors for the abyss of indiscipline and failure. Nonetheless, we trust in Jesus and in those who love Him and understand the commitment they made sincerely devoted to Him. She is targeted by odious enemies of the Lord to suffer their cruel persecution until the final hour. She is aware of it, but does not seem to be concerned. And this is really interesting. Sometimes what embarrasses her is fame, that great enemy of humility. Known for her mediumship faculty, they approach her with banal questions, praising her in an uncomfortable way when she would rather be ignored by to the commitment, but true to the commitment made in the spirit world. So her again, the preparation is so great, and the mind of the spirit incarnated under this condition is so great that it really it transcends what we see, in spiritism. Funny enough, again, I mean, as we were preparing this last night, finalizing this talk last night, we were listening to this gentleman talking about Chico Xavier, how he was with other people, and the different types of mediumship that he had, right? Touching things and knowing the content of a book, for example. People who went to see him, before, they even were to express himself verbally, Chico would come to that individual and say, look, why don't you think about this? Never giving the answer, but saying to them, perhaps, or at least comforting their hearts, right? And I remember when we had a couple individuals who came here at the Spirit Society of Baltimore to talk from Brazil, who were in contact with Chico Xavier. They told me the same thing, right? And as we study more, as we connect more with the message, we understand more and more. Because if you don't see it, it's hard to believe it, right? It's really hard to believe. But this is the investment, as it says here, invested 120 years towards this individual. And what were the investment that were made towards us? Questions for us to think about it, as we asked earlier. What do I have to do with this? Perhaps we have received a lot of investment and we forget. Why? Because we tend to live a materialistic life. Final thoughts, folks, and I would like to finalize this quickly because we're already over time here. I would like to ask you guys today, did you receive anything from anybody today? It can be anything, physical, or a hello, right? Did we connect with anyone today in a positive way, right? Something that is happening to us every day, but do we feel that we got something from life today? What about a hug? What about a smile, right? All that, the good things. Listen to what happens towards this chapter. Arriving at the hospital, our attention was turned to the nurse who had care for a mistreated patient, not only helping her, but also directing her to what she needed. The beneficiary had been infinitely thankful, and as soon as her health improved, she wanted to show her gratitude. It made the nurse feel very happy, but also embarrassed, since she felt she had done nothing more than her duty. We live, and this is Mr. Renan saying, we live in a time when society is surprised by kindness, by thoughtfulness, by demonstration of recognition. Human beings have become so callous that what should be normal, worthy of being experienced, causes amazement and even surprise. They got so used to ill treatment that duty seems a virtue that is quickly fading. What happens? This individual goes and tries to talk to this nurse and give her a hug, despite her putting her in a position that she could, get worse, right? Because she was helping the nurse. The nurse was, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but she was induced by her mentors to do something kind towards the nurse, because the nurse actually had suicidal thoughts as well. And that not only was going to help her, but help obviously the nurse, right? Because the nurse was like, my gosh, imagine being a nurse during the pandemic. Still working in a hospital, just working in a hospital, doesn't have to be through a pandemic. What they were seeing every single day, losing people, right? Having to work long hours. The pay sometimes, especially in Brazil, is not the best pay, but that was going to change the nurse's condition. Interesting enough, she was actually going to discarnate. Unconscious, she did not know, but she received from her mentor, and this is Manuel Philomeno de Miranda describing that he connected with her mentors that was around this lady who wanted to give the nurse the hug, that she had received the idea that she was going to discarnate. I believe, now I have to go back to the book, but I believe it was a heart condition that she had. So she didn't discarnate because of COVID, but days after this encounter, what she did here, she discarnated because of her heart, a heart ailment. But it goes to show again what we are going through, right? On how cold we have become due to our sorrows, difficulties that we're facing, that when something is so common that we should be doing more often, we perhaps stay away from it, right? Simple words of kindness, saying thank you or please, right? Or saying a hello, or perhaps doing something that, what we think is yes, perhaps, part of our daily lives. So it's like, no, I don't want to do it. It's too much for me, right? And we forget to do goodness. The patient was a noble spirit in a redemptive trial, like so many others surprised by the pandemic. And I would like to leave by this, to finish with these kind words by saying what Mr. Reynolds said, that love without a doubt is the best instrument to lead to self-discovery, the encounter with the self, in the grand adventure of conquering the infinite and attain plenitude. There's more to it, to both chapters. There's way more to it. I wish, again, we have unlimited time, but time is limited. We only have 24 hours a day. We have to learn, we have to go, and we have to practice what we learn here, right? It's not easy. Each one of us carry our own crosses, but it's important that we do our best as we learn from these chapters. And we read as well. So thus far, as we have always like to do, we have covered all the way down to chapter 10. We're pretty much now halfway of the book. If you haven't read it yet, please do so. And then we will cover next month on session 6, the Justice Makers, Expanding Experiences. So at this moment, I would like to share the opportunity with everyone to share your questions. If you have questions or comments, please say it slowly so I can repeat it here, so that everyone can also hear online with us. I'm gonna go up to, let me see, stop screen, to our comments here, and we see Yasko. We see everyone saying good evening, everyone, from Kirsten. Good evening, Kirsten, and we'll start with we'll give some time for everybody here, and we'll start with Yasko when she says, Interesting case. It seems that the discarnate obsessor was able to disturb the young nurse more than when he was incarnated. Is it right? It's a good question. Yasko, I don't know if in fact that would be the case. But what we also have is that there is an explanation that he pretty much found her back. Actually, Paul is actually correcting back there, or emphasizing that that is the case, that he found her back after a while. And why? And I think it's interesting for us to dive a little bit into this, because what? How did they find us? It's a follow-up question, right? Very valid follow-up question. How do they find us? Different body, right? I was actually joking. You guys know him, Adriano. After I shaved, he said, "Not even your mentor will recognize you anymore." Forget about the obsessors. Not even your mentors will recognize you anymore. We have these jokes with one another, but it's true, right? I mean, we change appearance, the outer appearance, but the way we think, the way we conduct ourselves is still the same way. How we vibrate towards the universe is the same thing. So it's important that we really pay attention to this. So what needs to change? Our thoughts, our feelings, right? So that perhaps if they re-encounter us, they're going to see continuously that we're making an effort to become a better individual. And perhaps that will be the foundation for them to diminish, right, coming towards us, right? So that's the idea there. But that's hopefully that answers your question. Does anybody have any questions before we go on to Yasko's second comment here? Anyone? All right, so let's move on then. Chapter 10, Malvina's reincarnation has been prepared since 1830, and her mediumship since, oh, thank you, I was gonna, mediumship since previous lives. So the mediumship with Jesus seems a very special endeavor that requires much longer preparation and experience to be successful. That is why many mediums fail in their planned endeavors and agreements. Yasko, it's a great question, but I like to also take in consideration the fact that the Manuel Philomeno de Miranda brings the fact that her the last time she was connected or exposed to mediumship or was a medium was not the same way. It was just let's say the baby steps of being connected with mediumship. So so we see the grandeur of our Creator giving us the first, the second, the third opportunities. Not to say that they're going to be the same, not to say they're going to be as easy as the first one should have been, right, based on our preparations. But it's important for also to think that things take time, right? For us to shift from the Christianity that we used to vibrate years ago into this new Christianity, where we're not attacking people physically anymore to impose Christianity, it's very difficult. One of the things that I would like to highlight here is that when we start dealing with our brothers and sisters here in the U.S., bringing Spiritism, this revived Christianity, right? It was very difficult because we encounter a lot of individuals who did not want to hear about Christianity because people thought that it was a new religion that would be as imposing as the different churches. And it's a struggle still because many of us, we read, we hear it, but we're still not on par with the message. And quite frankly, we impose towards ourselves. I have to follow Jesus. I have to follow the man. I have to follow the man on the cross in a very imposing way. And as a consequence, we do it towards others. So that to change takes time. Imagine to accept that there are two worlds, the incarnated one and the discarnated one. And that the way that we connect with one another is the same that we're connecting with one another here. So changes are subtle. Works, they don't start from the top. It starts very little. The foundations, sometimes we create very bad foundations and we have to rebuild. Things come apart and we have to rebuild again. But when we rebuild, hopefully we'll be a little bit stronger, right? Paula, please.
Do I need a talking stick?
No, you can say it. I'll try to repeat here because I have to use this microphone. Go ahead.
Okay. I learned something about mediumship meetings that I was unaware of.
Okay.
With the disturbing spirit, he did not come to an understanding about himself. What happened was he is given some kind of treatment that puts him to sleep, and then he's going to get help in a spiritual community.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been thinking that when you are engaging with the spirits that come into mediumship meetings, that you continually work with them until they come to understand, but that's not necessarily true. They can be scooped up and treated.
Very well. So what she's asking, what she is trying to get clarification on, Paula, is that she was under the understanding that when the obsessor or the spirit who is being helped, he or she is kept with the mediumistic group until that spirit is rehabilitated. To a certain extent, yes, but what happens is, as you described, or as we saw in the book as well, is that spirit comes through the medium, and what happens is they receive this anemic shock, right, with the physical body, right, and they receive that reality, whether is expressed verbally or not. They receive this reality. Look, you lost your physical body. Right now, you're speaking through someone else, and they wake up. That's reality, and sometimes that reality can be so hard for the spirit that they even feel either they tend to, they want to run, or they feel tired and whatnot. They don't understand. So after that moment, what happens? They are put to sleep, or they're giving some kind of treatment that little by little, as they wake up after that moment, they will be giving more instruction of, this is what happened. This is how you'll be able to enhance your life and get out of this loop that you're leaving, right? And yes, that treatment, that continuation goes on in the spirit realm, right? That doesn't mean that, perhaps there is no connection with the Spiritist Center, because the Spiritist Center is not only the mediumistic meeting, but also talks. So that spirit can be brought to the Spiritist Center to receive treatment during our public meetings. During the moment of passes, in the consequent weeks, right, they also brought to that location. So that's why I like to say that, what say it's correct, but there are also a continuation on the work. But most importantly is that first moment that they have, right? Does that make sense? So that's the idea. And this is also, again, an illustration on how we are important for the work. Because sometimes when we think that we're here just to receive the passes, no, we're emanating as well. And that spirit who was helped a couple weeks ago, they can be connected to us. Paying attention to, like we pay attention to whatever we're wearing, right? Oh, that's a nice, top and whatnot. The spirits that are paying attention, they're listening to what we're thinking, how we're feeling. Well, if Paula is here and she's very concentrated, she's not thinking about, the problems that she had with her friend. Guess what? This is a place of worship, right? This is a place of kindness, happiness, right? Because they can see and sense our thoughts. Great question and great highlight as well, because again, we're all connected on the message, right? So, Paula, go ahead.
I have one more
Mm-hmm.
general comment. This story tonight was not a great advertisement to become a medium.
So Paul is saying this message tonight And I'm so glad that you said this.
Yeah.
She's saying that this
Yeah,
message
yeah.
tonight is not a good advertisement to become a medium. And and I thank you for this because I also had my moments of like gonna have to present this. But what does Jesus tell us? The afflicted ones will inherit the earth, right? So will the payment come now? No. We're talking about a on the way to a world of regeneration. And this is so pertinent to what we're going through right now. Because doing the hard and good things of life, it seems like it's not paying for anymore. We're not getting a return. I had a friend whose wife was hit by a car, and they're still fighting. It wasn't her fault, um, and they're still fighting with the person who hit her car. When the guy was wrong and hit her on the side, and it was an obvious situation, and this friend was complaining. She was right, and it seems like doing the right things doesn't pay for it anymore. I'm like, I get it. I understand your unhappiness towards the issue, but we also have to think that we have to continue to do the right things. We can't go out there and say, oh, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to only think about myself. These moments are pretty similar to what was happening 2,000 years ago, right? And yes, Paula, I agree with you because sometimes, thinking, oh my gosh, being a messenger of Christ, I'm going to be attacked. No. Who wants to deal with that, right? But then again, do we talked about the responsibility that comes when we assume a spiritual life, when we assume that, or when we are in accordance that we will come back. So, what do we want to find in the next reincarnation? A world of regeneration or a mess worse than what it is now? It's a choice. So, for those out there, and I'm glad you asked this, and including myself, because I'm not an ostensive medium, but I have my moments that things go across my mind, and I'm like, okay, why am I thinking about this? For those out there who are an ostensive medium, and we have some of them here who have the moments of doubts, let us pray for them because they go through a lot. Let us pray for ourselves, right? That perhaps we continue to go through this moment. And it's not that God has put us in a tough position or God demands something very negative from us, right? Harsh from us. But it's only to fix something that we created in the past. We saw here. It's a consequence, whether we like it or not. So I'm glad that you asked this question because the road is not easy, the work is not easy, but we have one another, right? We have this message. Imagine, as we saw here, the mediums of the past that had no information whatsoever on what they were seeing, what they're feeling. Imagine the children when, like Divaldo, used to get hit because he was seeing things. And now we have spiritism. And now we have spirituality. We have different spiritual books saying there is a connection, folks. We have movies. We have different tools that we can look at and say, huh, I'm not the only crazy one. There are other crazy ones too, in a good sense, right? But the work continues. And as we have seen Malvina here as this difficult advertisement, since you also using the business language there, right? We can see that perhaps the payment will come after. Are we to her level? By far, I don't feel at all that I'm that at that high level. But one thing is true that we're all connected in the same message. We're all trying to relive Christianity in a different way, and I think that is the message that we can leave one another. I'm glad you asked again the question, and let that question resonate in our minds and our hearts. Because when we go to bed tonight, we can think that, look, perhaps the physical body is sleeping, but I will go to the other side. And what am I doing on the other side? And I'm asking this to myself too. Believe me, if I can, and this is going to be my final words for this talk tonight. I think I'm certain, I shouldn't say think, that for the presenter, this is I think the message to me is just like, it's for me, right? It's not that I am being possessive or anything like that, but, I'm not here in front or studying this book, because we have choices, right? But when presenting this message, it's really an eye opener to me. And I'm like, wow, what have I been doing? 120 years of preparation for this person, but she's not better than I am. God loves me as well. So, how many years of preparation have I had before? And here I am. And here we are, right? So, just something for us to think about it. I would like to thank everyone for this moment, and read the book. Let us share the messages. Send us any questions that you may have, any comments that you may have, and let us continue studying and doing our best in the realms of life that we serve, whether in the physical more than the spiritual, whether in the spiritual more than the physical, right? But together to get to this world of regeneration. So thank you, everyone. We'll stop at this moment, and we'll say a final visualization, and go into our passes. I'll ask